It's time for another edition of the Round the Nest 2.0, where we go up, down, left, and right through the Blue Jays system, talking all things Blue Jays minor leaguers with a sprinkling of big league action in there as well. Tyler from the Vancouver Canadians here, and the Nest is especially full today. Not only are we represented up and down the system, but we have our very first special guest today, and we're going to get right to it as we welcome the voice of the Nashville Sounds to the Round the Nest. We've got Jeff Hem with us, talking about some trade news along the way as Bowden Francis comes over from the Brewers to join the Jays. Jeff, first and foremost, thanks for joining the Nest. Glad you've landed with us here on this Friday. You're coming to us from Gwinnett, where you got a broadcast tonight between the Sounds and the Stripers. First and foremost, how is life in the AAA East Southeast? Really rolls off the tongue.
It's been good, and thanks for having me. I hope you put air quotes around the word special. I don't know that I'm the most special guest, but I'm thrilled to be with you guys and excited to talk about Bowden Francis here in a moment. But the AAA East, like I'm sure all of you guys have a variation of a similar story as the minor leagues have realigned this year. But honestly, for the Nashville Sounds, it makes a lot of sense. The Sounds and the Memphis Redbirds, you could have argued, should have been in the old International League a long time ago. Geographically, it made sense. We're happy to be able to play a lot more opponents who are closer to Middle Tennessee. So that part of it has worked out fairly well. And, as radio guys, selfishly, we like to go to new cities and see new ballparks and see new team operations. And I'm very thankful, especially with what 2020 was, that I'm able to do that so far this year.
Your ninth season on the mic for Nashville. You've seen a lot of Sounds baseball along the way. Before we talk about Bowden and get into what the Jays have gotten back in that trade, where certainly a fan favorite, Rowdy Tellez, joining the Brewers organization, so he's going to make an impact for sure. What has been your 30,000-foot view of the traveling and the restrictions or lack thereof? Certainly a little different perhaps there in Nashville and elsewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line in terms of having access and being able to be a part of different things. We've heard all about what's been going on in the Blue Jays system, but just curious to know what your day-to-day experience has been like.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's been fairly normal. The Brewers were an early on team to get to that 85% threshold, which has made affiliate operations and day-to-day access, for me to be able to talk to our manager, Rick Sweet, or to get pregame interviews. At times they were distanced, at times they were masked, but thankfully for me this year, they were in person from the jump. And the Brewers have been a great partner to the Sounds in that respect. And they've understood what we, the Sounds, have tried to need from our team and from our players. And so, a lot of that has felt fairly normal. And I think a lot of that is because as an organization, the Brewers pretty early on got to the threshold needed where they could welcome in more people into different covered territories and then expand from there and loosen appropriately certain protocols as things got better and better. And then from a Nashville standpoint, fairly early on in our home schedule, we were allowed locally in Metro Nashville to near 100% capacity. So other than a few games, we've had some good crowds, and that part of it has been really good too. So we're appreciative of what the season has been so far. And like I said before, just glad to have any version of it back. And the version that we've been able to have has felt fairly normal most of the time.
Indeed, normalcy, that word that's been bandied about so much over the last 18 months and when the return would be. So great to hear that things are almost there, it sounds like, not just in Nashville, but around the circuit. Let's get right to it. Why you're here is to tell us about Bowden Francis, a guy who was just acquired by the Blue Jays from Milwaukee and somebody who has pitched and had success at both levels in the upper minors in the Milwaukee system before the deal. Some of the things that jumped out to me, certainly the opponent's batting average against is sub 200. The strikeout to walk ratio is terrific. We can thank Brian Kenny for the kill to win movement, but certainly a win-loss record that you smile upon as well. What have you liked from Bowden since he joined the Sounds from Biloxi and has obviously made an impact in that rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Blue Jays got a really good one in Bowden Francis. I know he wasn't the only part of that trade, but I really liked what I saw from him. He joined us from Double-A, where the numbers, like you mentioned, were good. He joined us in late May, had a good handful of starts, and was effective from the start. his first couple of outings, he was not quite as efficient, probably, the nature of going from AA to AAA a little bit. Guys can foul off some pitches and extend at bats where maybe they get out eventually, but it prevents you from going deeper into games. Didn't take long for him to figure some of that out and start to be more like a 6, and in a couple of cases, a 7-inning guy. He had some dominant performances, some moments where he would get in these rhythms where he's retiring 11 in a row or 11 of his last 12, and guys just don't barrel him up. He is, you probably read the scouting report. He's not a 98 mile per hour guy. He's going to live in the low 90s, but guys just don't make much hard contact against him. He's a pretty cerebral pitcher, kind of a quiet intensity type guy, not super vocal, just kind of wants the ball. Give me the ball. I want to go do my thing. I just want to play. I just want to pitch. And our pitching coach, Jim Henderson, told me some good stuff about Bowden too, that really within the last year or so, he added a couple of pitches, essentially. He'd always thrown a changeup, but hadn't thrown it a lot. His changeup had come a long way, the Brewers felt like, in the last year. And he always had this really slow, kind of traditional downer curveball. Well, they added at the alternate site last year, and then some instructional league time. They had the time to invest in him adding a harder slider to go with the slower breaking ball. And it's fun to watch when he's got those mixed up, because he will drop that slow curve in on you every now and then, this mid-70s pitch, and guys just get frozen by it. And at one point this year, he wasn't throwing that much at all because they really wanted him to focus on this harder slider. And then it got to the point where he got the hang of that pretty quickly, and then went back to more like a 50-50 mix on those two breaking balls. And it took him to another level, so to speak, with his ability to get guys out, and it makes the fastball better. His changeup had been refined. He truly is a kind of a 4-pitch mix guy, where he seems confident in throwing any of them at any time. He kind of pitched his way, I think, in the last year or so into more of a prospect status, being 25. I think the prospect experts didn't love that age for a guy who was at AA to start the year, but that's not old. I mean, he's got a lot of bright years ahead of him. I really do think the Blue Jays got a good one, and I think the way he was pitching this year made it probably more of a trade the Brewers could get a guy like Tellez because of a piece like that. And I'm sure the Blue Jays felt like they did well, not just in getting Richards, but getting far more than a throw-in as Bowden Francis would have been in that deal.
25 years old, but certainly the physicality of Francis, 6'5", 225 pounds, that profile is exactly where I'm sure the Blue Jays want their starting pitchers to be. To put on your talent evaluator hat for a moment here, Jeff, obviously we're radio guys for a reason. We're in the booth, not down there on the field. We're not player development coordinators in any way, shape, or form. But from your opinion, what are some things, or maybe is there one thing that Bowden Francis will perhaps need to focus on with the Blue Jays that might need to be refined a little bit more, or tightened up, if you will, as part of his arsenal or part of his approach?
Well, he'll do well in the AL because he only had one career hit, and he got that hit recently, and the dugout erupted. They were doing the get the ball signal for him after his first career hit. I think it was like 25, 30 at bats before he finally got a hit. So he'll be fine with a DH. But I'm curious to see over the next year or two if there continues to be velocity increase for him. He's a tall, rangy guy. I'm not saying he's not strong. All these guys are relative strong, obviously, but I just wonder if that 91 to 93, maybe a 94 here and there, climbs to more of a regular sitting at the mid 90s, whether it's mechanical or just as he continues to mature. I'm curious of that. And all of their individual pitches can always get better. I don't know that he would say his hard slider is a finished product at this point. I know that slow curve that he likes to kind of surprise guys with is sort of his fallback. But you need more than just that to get big league hitters out to keep progressing. So I'm curious about if there's just continued velocity in his development. I've just seen a couple of other Sounds pitchers who in the last year or two have had jumps. They had jumps maybe at the alt site, and now even this year getting a little bit more. So I'm just curious if that continues to be the case for Bowden too. It's interesting too. The name being pronounced Bowden. He is named after Bobby Bowden. He's a huge Florida State Seminole. His whole family is Seminole lovers, Florida State guys. I think he was born in Orlando, but resides in Tallahassee. He committed to the Seminoles out of Chipola Junior College. And I asked him one time, I said, was that really hard for you to decide? Do you want to sign with the Brewers or not? Because it was your lifelong dream to go to Florida State. And he said, no, it really wasn't that hard. He said, what I liked about Chipola Junior College is we played ball and I hung out with my teammates. I didn't really feel like I needed to do the whole college thing. I wanted to get into pro ball. I wanted that to be the focus of my life, and off I went. And so he's a pretty, like I said, kind of a quiet intensity guy, but he's a competitor, and it was really fun to watch him pitch. And I emphasize the word pitch. I think he's not just going to get out there and overpower guys. He needs all the pitches, and at least at AAA, he was throwing them all and looking pretty successful.
Well, certainly exciting to have him. I'm sure he can trade some good-natured barbs with the former Florida Gator Kirby Snead, who's in the bullpen for the Buffalo Bisons these days. So some good love around the Sunshine State there. And Jeff, before we let you go, and this has been fantastic stuff. You're our first guest on this edition of Around the Nest, this season, I should say. So special indeed, to go back to your comment earlier, certainly feeling very special to have you here. But a little curveball for you. Tim Lopes, longtime friend of the Blue Jays, a guy who's made his way through the ranks in the Jays system, has been with Seattle, now is with Milwaukee. And if I saw on your Twitter, he was leading off just yesterday for the Sounds. What have you seen from Tim Lopes this year before we say goodbye?
Yeah, he's brought a lot to the table with his versatility, and even in the last couple of years, adding outfield to all the different infield spots he can play. Jack of all trades. The Brewers have already had him up there one time this year. And he's been successful for the Sounds. He's still on the 40-man roster. And for a first-place team, it wouldn't be a shock to see them, with different needs that come along as they navigate the schedule and different series and the versatility that he's got. He's been fun to watch. Great guy, great story, grinding in the minor leagues the way he did to get to the major leagues and get some extended opportunities with Seattle. I think that made a big difference for him and how he's approaching that AAA big league balance now, having not just had the cup of coffee, but gotten an extended run with Seattle the way he did the last couple of years. So he's been a good presence on our ball club. We're a little bit older team, a lot of guys kind of in his similar shoes that have had a decent amount of major league time. And he just goes about his business and happy to play anywhere and thrilled to be in the lineup with us and trying to make his way back to Milwaukee.
Indeed. That's Jeff Hem, voice of the Nashville Sounds. Jeff, can't thank you enough for joining us this afternoon Around the Nest. You got a game to call there in Gwinnett as the Sounds take on the Stripers. So cheers to you and be a good voice. Thanks very much for nesting with us today here on Around the Nest.
Happy to do it. Thanks for the invitation, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, we'll go bopping around the rest of the system. We've got some other duties for you East Coasters out there. So we're going to make this quick after getting some terrific stuff from Jeff on Bowden Francis, Tim Lopes, and life in the AAA East Southeast. Gosh, still working on getting that one out of my tongue cleanly. Let's go. How about this? I know Nathan Strauss, AA New Hampshire. He's got to get back to the ballpark to do a remote broadcast. And Nathan, I know there's not been a lot of Fisher Cats baseball to report upon as Mother Nature continues to rain Fisher Cats and dogs out there in the New England area. So before we let you go and get ready for your broadcast, Nathan, can you tell us about what's been going on with the AA Fisher Cats over the last week plus?
Well, the answer is not that much. So you mentioned about how it's been raining Fisher Cats and dogs. Love that. Love the puns. 8 of our last 9 games have either been delayed or suspended or affected in some way by weather. So in our last series against Portland, which began last Tuesday, we didn't have a single 9-inning game. The opening game went 10 innings. We then had a cancellation or a postponement in each of the next 5 days. And we ended up having the second leg of our Sunday doubleheader on 4th of July suspended after 3 innings. So it was a wet series. The Fisher Cats did not win a game after the Fisher Cats won 2 of the 4. They had taken a 3-0 lead in the second game of the doubleheader with Portland before Portland scored 3 runs to tie it in the top of the 3rd. And that's where things pretty much left off. And then this week, we've just been unable to solve the Rumble Ponies. We are now 1-8 against them on the season. They have a winning percentage against us of .888. Their winning percentage against the rest of the AA Northeast is .265. So pretty shocking stuff all around, and pretty wet stuff all around as well.
You know, I've had a few chicken speedies at what is now Mirabito Stadium in my day, and that makes me sicker to my stomach than those diced chunks of chicken. So, Nathan, hopefully those Rumble ponies don't prove to be as much of an issue along the way as the remaining parts of this series kick off in the Parlor City, and you'll be on the call remotely tonight, and certainly glad to be able to have you joining us here today as you got to dash shortly. Before we say goodbye, have to get our weekly Vinnie Capra update. My goodness, the former Richmond Spider putting on for his hometown of Melbourne, Florida. What have you liked from Vinnie Capra this year as you get to experience Fisher Cats baseball for the first time this season?
Well, he is just such an excellent pull hitter that he is hitting consistently singles and doubles against a three-man shift as a righty. And he's not a very big guy. He's listed as 5'11", but I've interviewed him before, and I'm like a charitable 5'10", and we were definitely at eye level. So I think he's gotten more compact, really. He's shortened up his stride. He really bends his knees a lot when he's batting as well. He really gets around on the ball quickly, and that's what helps him beat these shifts. Otherwise, it's really just experience. I think our team is particularly young, even by AA standards. He just turned 25 2 days ago, and that makes him one of, if not the oldest position player on our roster, aside from sort of career minor leaguers like Rodrigo Vigil. So he has just really demonstrated that he is both a leader, but also, capable of late growth. And he's hitting cleanup today. We would not have expected that to be the case earlier on in the season. So it's really good to see.
Any final thoughts for AA New Hampshire before we say goodbye? We kick you out of the nest and you spread your wings and fly.
Well, I have to say that the last couple of weeks have gone just about as well as you would think if you took away at various times 4 of the 5 best players in a team's lineup. So Austin Martin missed time in concussion protocol after getting hit with a 91-mile-an-hour fastball in the helmet. He is back and now leaving us again tomorrow to go play in the Futures game, the Sirius XM All-Star Futures game on Sunday. Samad Taylor fouled the ball off his foot and has been out for the better part now of a week. Gabriel Moreno had surgery and is on the 7-day IL, but we're not expecting him back anytime soon. And Jordan Groshans was removed from Tuesday's series opener and has yet to see the field since then. So again, when you take away basically the top 5 guys in your lineups for various points of time, and of course, Simeon Woods Richardson, who is going to the Olympics after his start tomorrow, the records are they're gonna drop a little bit. So it's an opportunity for other players to sort of step up and show what they've got in the absence of some of the bigger names.
Well, it's time for the pride of Sherwood Park, Alberta, Tanner Kerwer, to ascend to that terrific spot in AA. We miss him here in Advanced Day Vancouver. But Nathan, as always, thanks for joining us here on Around the Nest. Be a great voice tonight on your remote broadcast as the Fisher Cats take on the Rumble Ponies. And of course, you can stay up to date with everything Fisher Cats at nhfishercats.com. Mr. Strauss, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the call.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we got another guy who's got a dash, Gregg Caserta, Triple G. We're going to keep it quick. We're going to tag team it between Gregg and Pat, Buffalo. And of course, Pat's got all of the tasty Salem Field updates for us as well. Pat's going to be next. And then we've got AT, Andrew Thriffiley, telling us about Low A Dunedin as well. And by the end of it, maybe it's just me and our producer, Leo Mui, hanging out talking about the Vancouver Canadians, which I don't have a lot of good things to say. But you know what? There's always a silver lining in the Jays system. But Gregg Caserta, nice to see you. First of all, Guns N' Roses, really? That's pretty cliche.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old lounging t-shirt. I wear it to the gym. I wear it around the house. Occasionally, I'll wear it to the grocery store. So it's not my best, but Pat Malacaro will tell you that when you have something that's old and comfortable like this, you hang on to it for as long as you can.
I'm here for it. And, once you're on a big league broadcast, Around the Nest just doesn't have the same gravitas. So, I'm here in a team polo. We got Pat and Andrew doing the same, but I get it. We're just happy to have you. So most importantly, enough of my hot air, if you will. Let's get to the nitty gritty. Tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing from those AAA Bisons. It has been a terrific stretch. Did I read that right? That it's 15-5 in their last 20, and they have just been climbing up the standings and in the win-loss column, or really just the win column, after being right around 500 in the middle of the month of June.
Yeah, it's been terrific. And Zick, when we last spoke, I was kind of telling you the exact same thing. This team's been doing everything right. There really haven't been many flaws. I think outside of the weather, which has affected most of the Northeast, and the fact that games have started and been suspended and picked up, this team's beating the competition that it should. I've talked about how they've really capitalized against Rochester, a team that they match up incredibly well against. They've gone there and beaten them at Frontier Field a handful of times. I think losing Rowdy Tellez certainly changes the dynamic of this lineup. I mentioned all along how having a big left-handed bat in the middle of this order has definitely helped them this year. But I also think you see Logan Warmouth turning his season around. You see Kevin Smith continuing to open eyes and get people to say, all right, when is he going to get the call to Toronto? And now you're getting rehabbers that come in to pitch for a pitching staff that hasn't really needed any help or reinforcements. Guys that were struggling early on, like Danny Jimenez, are starting to turn it around. And they're overcoming stretches by Brian Baker, Hobie Harris, and Kirby Sneed that you might consider to be bumps in the road, which for them it's bound to happen because of the starts that all three of them got off to. So it's hard for me to find flaws with this team right now. They've been fundamental all year. They've been stealing bases at an incredibly efficient rate. They usually play defense pretty well, and they've got a really good manager in Casey Candell who just lets things flow.
I'm glad you went there with Casey, because there was a great article on Bisons.com talking about Casey's perspective, how he keeps it loose. I love how they let off with the quote where he was taking full credit, sarcastically, of course, for all the success of the Bisons over the last 6 weeks or so. I'm going to get Pat's opinion on this as well, but I would love to know what your overall experience has been of the skipper there with AAA Buffalo.
This is one of the best coaching staffs as a whole that I've been around. And unfortunately, I can't get to know them the way I would in the past. I can't be on the bus with them. I can't really travel with them. I can't be down in the clubhouse with them. But from a distance, when we do have our interactions, it's been terrific, not just with Casey, but with hitting coach Corey Hart, with pitching coach Jeff Ware, and of course, with longtime position coach Devon White. Pat will tell you, having run all of our post-game Zoom sessions, that Casey always has a joke, if not two or three. I actually think he would fit in very well on this podcast. I think he would vibe very well with you, Zick. He's a Cali guy. I think he's the ideal AAA manager, because having been around it a little bit now and having my first taste of AAA, you kind of get a sense of how more personalities need to be juggled, because you have guys that are not only trying to make it for the first time, but guys that are trying to get back to the majors after getting sent back down. And I think he just kind of sets the temperature for the room. I don't think he gets too high or too low. I don't think he takes himself particularly seriously, and he's usually in good spirits. And I think especially being away for the last year, he appreciates it a lot more. And so I'm surprised that he didn't really get a AAA opportunity like this sooner, because he is the ideal guy to maintain a AAA clubhouse.
Wow, sounds like cut from the same cloth as I am, in the very back of Joanne's Fabrics. Not a sponsor, just getting some free love here, because me, take myself seriously, never, ever. Gregg, before we say goodbye to you, you got to dash and continue your day out there in the Northeast. Want to tell you, or I should say, have you tell us a little bit about where this team is headed next. And if you could get your crystal ball out, look into the future. We're going to talk to Pat a little bit about the change in approach, more walks for the Bisons over the last month or so. But as some of those things continue to change, it seems like this Bison club is able to sort of adapt. And 1 month they're really overpowering at the dish. And then the pitching staff, they've certainly continued to ascend over the last month and a half. So as you look ahead through the rest of July into August, and of course now with a AAA postseason, using air quotes for our audio-only listeners, what's going to be the vibe going forward? Can you kind of put on your predictor hat here and do a little bit of fortune telling for us?
I think you basically have to divide this Northeast division into two tiers. You have your upper three, which is Scranton, Worcester, and Buffalo/Trenton. And then you have the lower third, which is Lehigh Valley, Syracuse, and Rochester. And I think the only thing that worries me is that if they do have one of those letdown series where, let's say, they overlook an opponent, knowing that Worcester's on the horizon or that Scranton's on the horizon. Now, Scranton, I'm not looking forward to seeing again, because all their games take at least 4 hours. But I want to see what happens against Worcester, because it seems like they've evolved more than any other team in the division, where when we saw them to begin the season, they really didn't look like a cohesive squad. And now it seems like they've really come together. So for me, I want to see how Buffalo team lines up against Worcester. I think that, again, the Rochester matchup benefits them. I think Syracuse has been down all year, so I see them being relatively easy in terms of the competition and in terms of how they match up. Lehigh Valley, I think, is going through a rough stretch as well. I think that they might be on the decline right now. So to me, I'm looking more forward to the Worcester series and what that brings, because I think in terms of the matchup, I think it's probably the most balanced in terms of what both teams' strengths and weaknesses are. I think in the end, Scranton's going to be standing alone atop the division. But in terms of the number 2 spot, I think it goes back and forth between Worcester and Buffalo. And I think the teams haven't seen each other in a while. So I think it's going to create a very, very interesting, eye-opening matchup when the time comes and the two of them get together again.
As always, nothing but good stuff from Triple G. Gregg, thanks very much for joining us. And you've set the bar very high. Vintage, concert, or band tees for everybody around the nest next week when we'll talk to you again. But for now, Gregg, cheers to your day and your weekend. And go Bisons. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime, fellas. Talk to you in a couple days.
We're sticking around at the top of the system and with the big leaguers, Pat. Got to get right to you. First of all, there is a terrific piece of memorabilia that I noticed when you logged on before we started recording. We talked about it on the Nest a couple episodes ago. Might have even been, 2 weeks ago when we had you. There's that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. home run counter right behind you. My goodness, what was that giveaway like that night? That must have been a great vibe around Salem Field.
It was, and it was a Friday night. And if I remember correctly, it was probably the biggest crowd, even with the Yankees series that was at Salem Field prior to the homestand starting, because of some of the restrictions and social distancing that was still in place. The last homestand was the first one where the ballpark could be at 100% capacity. So more than 7,000 people in the ballpark on that Friday night. And for folks that may have been to Salem Field in the past, for a Friday night bash where you have 10,000 and you have that major league feel that we talk about a lot over the years, that was really one of those nights where you start to think, all right, things are back. We've used the word normalcy a few times already. That felt pretty normal that Friday night. So it was all around great night at the ballpark. And oh, by the way, Harry Smith from NBC News was doing a piece about the Blue Jays playing in Buffalo and some of the history behind Major League Baseball in Buffalo. So that was even another layer to the whole story.
This is why you're a pro's pro, Pat. You read my mind and you brought up that NBC spot, which I got to watch. I think it might have been yesterday, if not the day before, on social media. What a great opportunity to showcase Buffalo and to show just how the Bisons franchise and the city of Buffalo has really worked so well in concert with Toronto and the Jays organization to be able to make that their home away from home, really just a long home run away, a very long home run away, but a long home run away nonetheless from Toronto downtown in the 6. So what was that like, getting that national publicity, if you will? Had some Blue Jays brass in the house, of course, and I'm sure that created a little bit of an interesting experience around the ballpark when you've got the NBC and the Today Show in the house.
It was great. And like you said, just being able to showcase what our partnership is. And for Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, it goes back to even before the days of the Toronto Blue Jays and Buffalo Bisons becoming partners. It goes back to the mid 1990s when Mark Shapiro was the farm director in putting together Bison rosters that included guys like Casey Candell. So, it's showing off and letting everybody else know just what it's like. And even one of the folks on the Today Show even asked the question, a question we've been asked, I know it's come up a lot, is could Buffalo be a home for Major League Baseball because of what it's done to help the Blue Jays the last 2 years? And unfortunately, the answer, I think Harry Smith nailed it pretty well. And there are other cities, maybe even one that Jeff earlier on here and around the Nest might have a better shot right now than Buffalo. But just to showcase what Buffalo has done and how we've tried to be a good partner to our parent club and how it's been a two-way street, I think really was the main takeaway from it all.
And not just is it a celebration of baseball, Blue Jays baseball and Bisons baseball, but it's also, whether or not the record was good, but it's been terrific play from the Blue Jays at Salem Field in Buffalo. So they've really risen to the occasion. I think you could certainly make excuses if the team wasn't playing as well as they've been over the last month plus, that, oh, well, they're not at Toronto again. They've been on the road. They're vagabonds. They're not able to find a groove. But 8-2 to finish June. You take care of business against Tampa Bay. Then you hit the road to go to Camden Yards, where one was rained out, and they're going to make that up in September. But you split there. And then now you're going to take on Tampa Bay down at the Trop. So really an important part of the season for the Blue Jays, and also nice to see Shinjin Ryu doing his thing once again after a recent scuffle. So before we get your final thoughts on AAA Buffalo, where we pick up where Gregg left off, what have been some of the things that the Blue Jays have been doing right over the last month or so, and specifically in this recent stretch over the last 2+ weeks?
Well, we've talked a little bit about the bullpen in previous Around the Nest segments, and the bullpen has kind of calmed down and settled down recently. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Jordan Romano has been very good at the back end of the bullpen, but then everything from the starting pitcher to getting to the closer and everything in between has been kind of up in the air, whether it was injuries, whether it was just rough patches in the season that you're going to have over 162 games, or, however many outings you're going to have as a reliever throughout the course of the year. It seemed like all those tough performances were coming all at the same time. But you're right, being able to bounce back and bouncing back in big ways, and blowing out Tampa Bay in Buffalo for at least one of those games, and winning the first two, so that Charlie Montoyo talked about having to take at least 2 out of 3 from Tampa Bay that weekend. Well, you take the first 2, and not that you take your foot off the gas, but it allows you to have a day on Sunday where maybe you don't pick up the win and you still take 2 out of 3. So for the Blue Jays, I think it's a lot of, we talk about the comfort level for a lot of those players playing at Salem Field, but also I think it's just a matter of the team, the way it was constructed, is now back to where what we thought it would be. And you mentioned Ryu and getting back to the top of the rotation form. And someone like Anthony Kay, who has filled in a little bit in the starting rotation. So it's getting all those performances. We hit the ceremonial first half of the season break coming up in a couple of days. And look, there's going to be some big series coming up. At least one of those Red Sox series coming out of the All-Star break will be at Salem Field. The next one after that, is still up in the air. I know something that we'll touch on in a moment. So those are 2 big series coming up right out of the All-Star break at home for the Blue Jays that we'll have our circled on the calendar.
Certainly a perfect time for them to take on the Red Sox. 8 games out as of today, Friday, July 9th. But those 8 games don't seem as insurmountable as 6 or even 5 games felt perhaps a little bit earlier in the season, before this Blue Jays roster found its groove, and they continue to perform well as they make their way down to the Trop to handle business this weekend. Pat, before we say goodbye, I'm sure you got so much stuff to do in Buffalo, even on when the teams are out of town. But if you could tell us a little bit about some of your perspective on AAA Buffalo. Gregg got us there initially with Casey Candell, how you're the one organizing the Zoom, so you're getting a lot of that interaction. Can you fill in some of the gaps, if you will? Give us some of the color about Casey and what he really brings to the table.
Yeah, I think he's like Gregg mentioned, he's the perfect manager here at AAA because of what his experiences in the past bring, not only as a coach in the big leagues with the Mariners at one point, and working in the development side with the Blue Jays and managing and for Vancouver just a couple of years ago. But you go back to when he was on the Bisons roster in 1998, I think it was, and how he was one of those veteran players that was a great clubhouse presence. And if you talk to our front office, we talk a lot about Jeff Manto because his number's retired. We talk a lot about Torey Lavello, who's gone on to have a very good managerial career in the big leagues. But Casey Candell is one of those people in the clubhouse that really lighten the mood a lot. And I think that's what Gregg really, what he really captured of Casey is he's a guy that can, when things aren't going great, he might tell a joke. He can do something to lighten the load on these players who are maybe feeling the pressure of being one step from the big leagues, or having a bad week and wondering if it's going to affect just their status and the prospect label or where they stand in the organization. Casey, I think, is a perfect person for this level because he's been there before. He's been one of those veterans that has been able to lead a team and a Bison team that won a championship. And then the next year he went over to Nashville or to New Orleans, won a championship and won the AAA national championship. So he's a player who's won a lot in the past. He knows how to manage people and deal with personalities. And you add in players, coaches like Devon White, who's a 7-time Gold Glover and multi-time World Series champion, including with the Blue Jays. I mean, you've got a real good recipe for what your AAA coaching staff is.
feels like those people, and by those people, of course, I mean most people outside of the industry might lump minor league baseball all together, and then you have the big leagues separate. But each level really does have its own distinct personality, its ethos and pathos, if you will, to use my English major for once. And considering the fact that, as you mentioned, there are guys who are right on the cusp, to talk about 4A guys, if you will, really just on that roster because there's no place for them in the big leagues. So it sounds like Casey really is a guy who isn't going to get too caught up in maybe some of the minutia. He understands the bigger picture, and he's able to balance a roster that includes youngsters like Logan Warmoth, and then you've got veteran big leaguers like John Axford. It really is a balance that no other level in the minor leagues requires.
Yeah, and I'll use an example of Kevin Smith, just very recent. He's played the outfield twice now out of necessity. The Bisons right now, including Logan Warmoth, who's a converted outfielder, former infielder. Well, Logan's the only actual outfielder on the roster. Everybody else is primarily an infielder as it stands here in 2021. But because of some of the call-ups, because of some of the injuries, Kevin Smith had to play the outfield. So Casey went to him and said, all right, you're going to have a turn in left field one of these days. You tell me which day. And Kevin went into the outfield that first night, and he performed well. And it's about getting him ready for the next level. We all know Bo Bichette is the shortstop, not only the future, but of the present for the Toronto Blue Jays. So where can Kevin Smith be most valuable to Toronto going forward? And maybe it's not in left field, but you see the versatility and the ability to move to different positions. That is such an important piece of a young player in a team like for Buffalo, where you've got sort of solid pieces in certain spots already. So how do you find a different way to get to the big leagues? So that's something that Casey's been able to do, and working with the players. And, you know, Logan Warmoth, another example of somebody who has not looked out of place in the outfield this year for the Bisons, or Tyler White, who has now had some success here over the last 6 weeks or so, including a big home run the other night against Rochester. So yeah, it's been a lot of that just interaction and ability to kind of read the room, if you will, and know how to deal with everybody.
A lot of ink is spilled and hot air expelled about the idea of feel, and clearly Casey Candell has it, and there's tons of feel throughout the top levels of the system, and really just a testament to the organization that the Blue Jays have put together over the last, let's call it 10 years or so. Pat, before we say goodbye, want to talk about the changing approach for the Bisons at the Dish. Great article on bisons.com talking about how they've improved their walk rate, and they've gone from one of the worst or least walking teams, if you will, to one of the most walking teams. And they certainly have found ways to get on base. And then, of course, no surprise, their recent success sort of linked to having more runners on base. Seems pretty straightforward, but baseball's a simple game. Was this something that came down from the Jays from your perspective, or was it just something that perhaps the coaching staff or maybe even the players realized, you know, we need to take some more pitches and find a way to extend plate appearances, get on base, set the table for some of those big boppers like Kevin Smith and Christian Colon?
I think it's a couple of different things that all are kind of coming to a head at the same time in a good way for the Bisons, in terms of you have the veterans like Breivik Valera, who have been around and hit very well at AAA before. Tyler White has had success at this level before. So those are guys that really mature at the plate. But then Corey Hart has done a great job. Rowdy Tellez has talked a lot in the past about what Corey Hart has done for him at the plate and his approach and working with him. Even someone like other players around the organization have talked about that. Corey Hart he works one-on-one with these players and does a good job. Devin Travis, an example, when he was still in the organization. So, finding that comfort level, and whether it's refining a swing or seeing a different approach at the plate, I think Corey Hart probably has a lot to do with that success for some of these younger players who are seeing AAA for the first time. And, now that you're 2 months into the season, almost 3 months now into the year, you're seeing that comfort level that comes with just playing in games at this level and taking on pitchers, or seeing pitchers for the second or third or fourth time now, taking on a Rochester team that you've seen for the third series and second time in less than a month. That has a lot to do with it too, I think, and just knowing what pitchers throw and forcing a pitcher to make a good pitch against you because you have the upper hand at the plate. And I think that comes up with the approach. And I think that is just something that these young players have now figured out. And, like Gregg said, Scranton is such a very tough team to try and keep pace with in this division. But as we look at going forward, series against Syracuse or Rochester coming up, those are some chances to make some ground up in tied for second place heading into today with Worcester. It's going to be a fun stretch as this Bison offense continues to mature.
These next editions of Around the Nest next week and beyond, after finishing up this series with Rochester, taking on Lehigh Valley, then Syracuse, and then, as Gregg alluded to, that Worcester series coming up. Certainly a lot more to wrap our arms around in the coming weeks. So, Pat, as always, can't thank you enough for joining us, doing double duty as always. I mean, really not quite sure what we do without you here on Around the Nest between the Blue Jays and the Bisons. But as always, Pat, thanks for being a part of the fun today, and we'll talk to you along the way next week.
Always great to catch up with you, Tyler. Can't wait.
Thanks, Pat. AAA Buffalo and the big leagues. Gosh darn, we got to love it from Pat. All right, AT, Andrew Thriffiley, we're bringing you in. Dunedin, tell us a little bit about what's been going on with the DJs of late. And I'm going to have to ask about that game one of the doubleheader with the Tampa Tarpons. Ugh.
It is nice that it happened in the first game, that's for sure. You have a game like that where it just kind of gets out of hand. That lineup that the Tarpons are putting out there, it's a lineup filled with prospects that you're wondering, hey, why are these guys maybe even here? But I think it shows how deep that Yankees farm system is right now, because they have a lot of guys that can just hit, and they hit well. And they put it to us in the first game, but I think it also showed a lot of character from our team. Very young team, like I've said in the past few weeks, to come out, still be able to get a win in the second game, only give up 2 hits. One came in the final inning, and it was 2 not very hard hit balls, just 2 that squeaked through the infield. So it was good to see.
Now, as we dive a little bit deeper into some individual performances, did I see that Naswell Paulino named the pitcher of the week? Did I have my sources correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Not this past week against Palm Beach, but the week before that against Clearwater, he had a great outing. Had, I believe, 10 strikeouts, if I'm remembering correctly. Just great all around. Great player to be around. Fun guy, keeps everybody loose in the clubhouse. That's always good to see. Last week, Sem pitched very well with his 5 innings, no runs allowed. I believe 8 strikeouts himself. After our Around the Nest on Friday last week, we had a PK Morris going back-to-back games with a home run. So a little PK fire, always good to see.
But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a terrific reference right there.
Yes,
that is
sure.
Points. Yes, points for AT. My gosh.
The sad thing is he didn't understand the reference at first, but I showed it to him and we're good to go.
Okay.
The young kids, but he knows now.
That's how you know you're getting older, Andrew. You're only 25. I'm 30, but yeah, these are some youngsters here, and I don't know if they were ever playing Super Smash Brothers on a Nintendo 64, let alone GameCube or even the Wii.
No, it's just terrible what the youth has come to in this.
If Tyler Murray from AA New Hampshire was on with us today and heard you say that, he would have already been cooking something up for whenever PK gets up to AA New Hampshire. But I might have to steal his PK fire and do something when he gets to Advanced Day Vancouver, whenever that might be. For you, Andrew, I want to know if you think going forward there's any chance for these DJs to try and have a second half resurgent that could maybe get them into the mix. We know it was a rough start to the season, but the DJs, we check every day, keeping abreast of those scores. They've been playing a lot better baseball over the last 6 weeks. So certainly an early hole that they dug themselves. And when you play the Tampa Tarpons as many times as they have, sometimes just the baseball gods aren't in your favor. But is there any scenario in your mind where this team could find a way to rally and maybe challenge for a second playoff spot?
I mean, like you said, I think the Tampa Tarpons just have our number. Mm-hmm. And I think this team is playing well. Very unfortunate end of the week last week against Palm Beach. A lot of 1-run, 2-run games that you really feel like could come and play at the end of the year, where you feel like maybe we should have won some, whether it be a close call, or just a play that doesn't go your way. Like a Harry play at the plate, just miss the tag at the plate by a half an inch, and it's just those things just don't get your way all the time. The team certainly believes that they can do it. When they heard the news of being able to make the playoffs, it's something that they're striving for. Time will tell if we're going to get there. I think, like I said last week, this Tarpons series, if we can split the series with them and then segue that into Clearwater to really get going again, because we played Clearwater very well and won those games. If we can keep that going, I think we have a chance. I think the pitching staff, specifically with Trent Palmer, had 3 hitless innings last night. Sam Roberson, like I've said, Naswell winning pitcher of the week. The starters are there. If you keep taking our relievers, we'll see. And who knows, maybe we'll draft some, we'll have some draft people coming in soon. If we have some college arms that are maybe ready for this level, to inject some more talent. So we'll see.
Certainly want to thank you for Hernandez and Hernandez attorneys at law. That's Royther and Adrian, now with Advanced Day Vancouver, who were terrific for Loe Dunedin. Andrew, before we say goodbye and you continue your Friday at the ballpark and elsewhere, are there any players that we really haven't touched on here on Around the Nest that anybody listening who may have an interest might want to know about?
I think you look at, we talk about relievers, you look at Gabrielle Bonsay now. He's got 6 saves on the year. He's kind of taken that role over from Royther and Adrian now that they're gone. And he's just punching people out left and right. He's got a big fastball, sits 94, 96. Him and Sam are roommates, and they have a little competition of who can throw 96 more times. So always good to see. And then he's going to wipe you out with the slider. So I think that's a guy coming out of the pen right now that's got a ton of confidence, and you can really hang your hat on.
Andrew, as always, appreciate you joining us. Thanks for hanging around to the very end, as we have just been eliminating residents of the nest one by one by one. But it's kind of fun to kind of whittle it down and keep it a little bit brief, although we are running longer than we normally do. But it's worth it, as we had that update from our friend Jeff Hem in the Nashville organization. So AT, as always, cheers to your weekend. We'll be rooting for those DJs as Dunedin, who knows, could have a miracle down there in the low A Southeast. And you never know, maybe the Tampa Tarpons, they've become a fish out of water and they're not able to find their way for the second half of the year.
Got to keep believing. Always good to be on, and I'll see you all next week. Have a great rest of the week.
Andrew, thank you very much. Andrew Thriffiley from Low A Dunedin. Always a pleasure to have him giving us updates from not the lowest part of the system these days, but certainly one of the lowest, as certainly the future of the Blue Jays looking bright with a number of those individual performances. It's down to just 2. It's me and our producer, Leo Mui, and I'll keep it brief as we wrap things up with a Vancouver Canadians update. It has been certainly a disappointing stretch for Donnie Murphy's club after an 8-game winning streak to set a franchise best back in May, and certainly very much in the mix at the top of the 6-team High A West with Everett and with Eugene, the 2 best clubs in the circuit. These days, it's not been so great, as they are 2-8 in their last 10 after yesterday's loss to Spokane. Back-to-back 1-run losses after a 9-3 win on Tuesday, following a 5-loss in 6-game series against the Aqua Sox at Funko Field in Northern Washington. Certainly not great to look at the record this morning and see that the Seas are 1 game below 500 for the first time since the 7th game of the season. In fact, the last time they were below 500 was when Spokane beat them in the home away from home opener on May 11th. And then the next day, that 8-game winning streak started. Could something like that happen tonight? That's certainly the case, especially against the Spokane club that Vancouver has had a lot of success against already this year, 10-4 against the Indians, though certainly an opportunity to try and right the ship. And there's a lot of guys who are banged up. Cameron Eaton has been put on the injured list as of last week with a hamstring issue, though the skipper told me that there's a great chance that he comes back after just the minimum time on the IL. It's clear that this is a different team when Cameron Eaton is not in the lineup. And I said it last week as well. Once Tanner Kerwer was promoted to AA New Hampshire, the lineup changed. When you don't have a guy like Kerwer at the top of the order who's going to give you great at-bats, who can hit for power and for average, who runs all over the base paths, and is also a guy who's not afraid to get dirty and kind of grind, to borrow that minor league cliche, you don't necessarily have that lightning rod at the top of the order that you're used to. Although Rafael Lantigua, who is now the de facto leadoff man for the Seas, he has come into his own as he's gotten more playing time. He's found his power stroke. He had 2 home runs in that series against Everett last week. Still finds ways to get on base. He's finding ways to really pester opposing pitchers. He finds a way to collect at least 1 steal every game over the last week or so. And he is a guy who is talking a little bit about what we spoke with Pat about in terms of outfielders or the lack thereof. Only 2 true outfielders on the roster right now for Vancouver. That's Eric Rivera and DJ Neal. As we told you, Cameron Eaton's on the injured list, but Rafael Lantigua, he has been pressed into duty as a center fielder and right fielder of late. It's not often you have a guy who's 5'8" and 160 pounds playing center field, though Jonathan Davis, certainly heavier than 160 pounds with those muscles that he's got, but a guy who's not necessarily tall in stature, but can go get it out there in the deepest parts of the park. Has also seen Spencer Horwitz get some time in the outfield. He'd been playing first base, but would need to pick up his power numbers if he's going to stick at a corner infield spot, but he has been serviceable in left field. And Sebastian Espino, who for me has been the biggest surprise of the year for Vancouver, not only has he been rotating between third base and left field, but he is batting north of 360 with runners in scoring position. At one point had a 17-game on-base streak to start his advanced day career, and recently had an 8-game hitting streak come to an end. He has been excellent. He's hitting for average, he's hitting for power, and he comes up in those clutch situations able to make good. Luis de los Santos, another guy who has been very solid and consistent. He has been the shortstop du jour, if you will, for the Canadiens all season long. And 2 nights ago, for me, had one of his best games in the field. I don't think he's made very many errors. I need to go back and check the stats, but if anything, it's maybe 2 or 3 on the whole year. But he had such a terrific night the other night at shortstop, making the routine plays look as though he could do them in his sleep, and making some terrific plays as well to help out the pitching staff in what was that 9-3 win on Tuesday. On the pitching side, at least on the top prospect side, Adam Kloffenstein kind of finding it again. Not a guy, as we know by now, who's really going to overpower hitters with the fastball, keeping it in the low 90s. But the 4-pitch mix, certainly quite serviceable. He got the start and the win on Tuesday night, and will go again in the series finale on Sunday. CJ Van Eyck got hit a bit in Everett. We talked about it last week on Friday after he pitched Tuesday and went 2/3 of an inning. Was much better on July 4th, though he didn't factor into the decision. So for Van Eyck, a guy who's certainly very, very highly thought of, not just by the Blue Jays, but by talent evaluators across baseball. Looking forward for CJ getting back to action. Should be tomorrow as Willie Gaston makes the start tonight for Vancouver. Certainly a long monologue for me, as I'm the only one left on the nest, but I think if you head to CanadiensBaseball.com and have a chance to check out what's been going on lately with the C's, that'll tell the story. But certainly still thinking very positively about Vancouver's chances of making it to the playoffs, because they still have 18 games against the Aqua Sox remaining this year. And so that's one of the 2 top teams in that 6-team High A West. So the destiny still remains in Vancouver's hands. We're never counting the C's out. We have seen what they can do, and certainly a club who right now is scuffling, but is going to find it along the way. And Donnie Murphy, I trust, because this club certainly has some of the pieces, once Cameron Eden comes back especially, and who knows who's going to join us from Low A Dunedin, to be able to make that run and try and stick it to the Frogs from Everett as our season continues. No better way to wrap up another edition of Around the Nest than thinking about the future, specifically next week when we're going to have another full edition of Around the Nest, and maybe cook up another special guest. I've got one in the back of my mind who might be a surprise even for our producer, Leo Mui. But I've got some politicking to do if I can get this guest on. It's not as great as you may be thinking, but certainly somebody who has a wealth of minor league baseball experience and can give us some insights on a current new addition to the the bullpen for the Blue Jays, recently acquired from Miami, and also a guy who's been pitching for Double-A New Hampshire along the way. But I'll say no more for now, because of course, you've already spent almost an hour with us on this edition of Around the Nest. So for all of us here at the Nest, including our producer, Leo Mui, and a special shout out to Pat Malacaro, Gregg Caserta, Tyler Murray, Nathan Strauss, Andrew Thriffiley, and today's special guest, Jeff Hem from Nashville, telling us about Bowden Francis. I'm Tyler Zickel saying so long, and we'll see you next time on Around the Nest.